he had indicated that he had spoken to the different money transfer companies and along with the telecommunication companies. And so they were on board. And the goal was to get the money so that they would be able to pay for education for, as I say, underprivileged and poor people. Which, if that were really the case, I don't think anyone would have had an issue.
Marcel and Rodney, thank you so much for making the time to talk to me about this case. It's actually quite interesting and has a lot of connections to other countries or people from other countries that send money back home. I want to kind of get the premise of this right so people understand what this case is that you guys are handling. So, for Haitians outside of Haiti that live in the United States that want to send money back home, they have been charged an extra $1.50 fee to send money or food back home. On the surface, for those of us who are used to doing this and having Western Union charge us money to send money, it doesn't seem unusual, but obviously it is because it's you guys are having some success through the courts. Can you explain what this practice is that the Haitian government is taking part in and what makes it unusual? Marcel, I'll start with you.
Alrighty. Well, again, when we decide to go to Western Union to send money back home, wherever home may be, we're buying a service. We're entering into a contract with Western Union because we are incapable of just sending the money ourselves. So they have a system whereby they can move money in such a way, and for that they are charging us a fee just so that they can wire the funds for us. Now, the difference is when you go, you send, let's say you're sending $50, let's say to Ethiopia, then that $50, they say, hey, listen, you're gonna have to pay us $5 in order for us to send the $50 for you. That's fine. That's exactly what you're doing. You pay them the $5 and they send the $50 for you. But in the case of Haitians, what they are doing is they're saying, hey, listen, in addition to the $5 that we are going to send to Haiti for you, we are going to tag on an additional $1.50, which we are not charging anybody else, and which we wouldn't even charge you, my Haitian friend, if you were sending money back to, let's say, Ethiopia or Kenya, Uganda, to a friend, even to somewhere in Asia. They wouldn't charge you as a Haitian that $1.50, but because you're sending it to Haiti, we are going to charge you $1.50 more, as opposed to just the $5 to send the $50. So that in and of itself is a violation of the Sherman Act, because what you are doing, you are discriminating against a group of people because of where they came from to charge them more than you would have charged anybody else. So that is the premise of the case. That's why it's so different than just paying the $5 to send money anywhere else.
And is it true that if they had gone about collecting this extra $1.50 fee the proper way, having it go through the constitutional channels in Haiti, that it might be okay? But the way they did it also was dishonest, it seems, in terms of what they said the 150 is for. Rodney, you can step in, or Marcel, you can take on this question.
Rod, you want to step in?
Well, the way that they did it, I think if they had gone through the proper channels through the Haitian government and, for example, pass a bill or wanting to raise it as a tax, I don't think there would have been an issue. But the scheme was that the monies that they were going to collect, they were going to use it to fund education for underprivileged and poor children. And so they created through the Bank of Haiti, these circulars. And what these circulars do is give the government the authority to collect this $50. Some say it's just a fee, some say it's a tax. But the Haitian legislature had no input. They had no say, because this is a scheme that was created by Martelly even before he became Prime Minister of Haiti, even before he was elected into office. He had indicated that he had spoken to the different money transfer companies and along with the telecommunication companies. And so they were on board. And the goal was to get the money so that they would be able to pay for education for, as I say, underprivileged and poor people. Which, if that were really the case, I don't think anyone would have had an issue. If the government is saying, oh, people in the diaspora, if you can just give an extra $50 to help out, because they had an earthquake, they've had several unfortunate situations. So the government is cash strapped, so help us out. I don't think anyone would have said, oh no, I'm not gonna help you by giving $50. But because it was a scam from the outset, they had to go about it the way that they did.
So this program didn't even exist at all, right, Marcel?
No, the program did not exist. Martelly was, well, he was selected. Rodney said before he was elected president of Haiti, but he was selected as the president of Haiti by the State Department of the United States.
Marcel.
I know. We just a little point of clarification. But in addition to that, I still believe Rod and I, we would always butt head as far as that is concerned. I agree with Rodney in terms of, if the money actually was being used, put to good use, I don't think we would be here. Okay. The issue that I still have, whether it had gone through the proper channel, constitutional channel, the issue that I still have, I, as a resident of the United States, cannot be subjected to a tax from a foreign government. It defies logic, whichever way you turn it. Okay, unless, of course, what you are saying is that the service providers who are doing business in Haiti are subjected to that particular tax, and they can pass on that so-called fee or additional taxes to the customers. That's how business is usually done. Okay, if the United States government were to come up with some crazy tax scheme and charge service providers, the service providers are going to say, "Well, no problem, Mr. Government. This is what we're going to do. We're going to pass this. We're going to pass the additional charge to the customers." But here I am in the United States, and it makes very little sense to me. I kept telling Rodney that, because it's as if, this is Christmas Day and the Salvation Army guy is standing outside there collecting a little bit of money, and then somebody comes out of nowhere and sticking his hand in the pot, taking whatever it is that is in there. That's how I equate it, and it's supposed, donations, in a sense, donations is not supposed to be taxable. That's what I'm told in the US. And every time we send money back home, whether we are Jamaicans, whether we are Ethiopians, whether we are Ghanaian, whenever we send money back home, it's a donation. It's a gift that we are given. What business would any government in their right mind have to tax that?
So that's an interesting point. So just so for anyone who doesn't know, Michael Martelly is the former president of Haiti. He was president from 2011 when this practice started to 2016. To your point, Marcel, in terms of the argument that you made, it would have possibly made more legal sense if the Haitian government was charging the Western Union and these other money transfer companies a certain tax, and then they passed it on to you, the customer who was using them, right? But instead, they were directly saying the people in the United States that are sending money to Haiti are going to pay this $50 tax or fee, whatever you call it.
Correct. In fact, when Martelly, the first interview that Martelly gave with this entire scheme, his position was that we are going to tax the wire transfer companies. That was his position. And then he was going to tax them $1 for every transfer that is effectuated. And then the dollar now turns into $1.50. and then so and now a lot of Haitians are claiming that it's not just about, it's not, they don't collect only $1.50, because the when you go to collect your little $50 that you sent for me, what they do is they said that, hey, listen, we're taking $1.50, but we don't have the 50 cents, so they ended up taking $2 as opposed to $1.50.
That is so interesting. And just so everybody knows, Daniella Bien-Aime has joined us, my Haitian writer and journalist, fellow Haitian journalist. So she'll be doing this interview in part with me. So okay, now that we've set up why that 150 was unusual, right? Because when this case was first filed in 2018, the first judge essentially said this has to do with active state sovereignty of Haiti, and the judges that came after and sent it back to that court said, no, it goes beyond that, because this is an unusual practice that is actually affecting the very people that are within our jurisdiction in the United States. So talk a little bit about how the case went the first time. You know what? Let's go even further back. This practice started in 2011. You guys got the case in 2018. How did that come about?
Well, I got involved in doing some nonprofit work. So we came across one of the plaintiffs, Odilon Celestin, and he spoke to me about it, and I said, you know what? Yeah, let me look into it, because he was distraught. And at the same time, I was very concerned as well, because I came from Haiti and I'm not seeing any schools that's been built by the Haitian government for the kids, okay, that they're claiming that they wanted to house or school or educate, if you will. So when Odilon approached me, my very first thing was like, you are correct. I've been giving it some thoughts myself, but let me look into it a little deeper and see what can be done. Then when I looked into it and I uncovered the two, well, the very first thing that I uncovered was the presidential order. Okay, then I looked at the Haitian Constitution, and nowhere in the Haitian Constitution does it give the president the power to issue any kind of decree that would affect the people's lives. So I then went ahead and looked at the administrative laws of Haiti again. The so-called president of Haiti does not have any kind of power or authority to issue any decree or rule by decree, the way that they have been doing for, I don't know, decades. And then I found the no. Then we sent a letter. Then I called Rodney, and then I said, Rod, this is what I'm thinking, and this is what I would like to work on. And Rodney says, well, Marcel, I'm in. So we drafted a letter of demand. The very first party who reached out to us was the Western Union, and they brought to our attention that what they are doing is not illegal under Haitian laws, because they had a circular, and as we know, the circulars are like laws. No, circulars are not laws. But anyways, they brought the circulars to our attention, and I also believe that they avail us with a copy of the circulars. And then when I looked into it again under Haitian administrative laws, circulars are not laws. They are designed for internal uses among different governmental departments, for the employees to be made aware of certain laws that have been enacted and how they ought to comply with the laws, not to affect the public in general, the way that they've done it. So that's how it came about.
That's really interesting. So, what I found in terms of the difference between the first judge and then the judges that followed is the first judge kind of said, nope, this isn't really our a thing that we can touch. It's beyond our jurisdiction. And then the second judge, it almost seemed like an avalanche of judges saying, no, this is definitely not usual. You need to take this case back and look at the active state sovereignty element. And then a second judge said, no, beyond that, you need to actually look at the merits of this case. This case actually has, some meat to it, is sort of what I gathered from the judgment. I want Daniella to step in here about how much Haitians outside of Haiti actually send back to Haiti and why this is important. Daniella, I'll let you step in here.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think we have to give the audience sort of like a big picture. Up until 2019, there are about 3.5 million Haitians outside of Haiti. And inside Haiti, we have about 11.5 million, depending on where you're looking at, when you're looking at the World Bank or other quote unquote public institutions, right? What I wanna really emphasize here is that all of this was happening right in the backdrop of one of the most catastrophic events in Haitian history. As you know, most people know, the devastating earthquake took place in 2010, right? And this alleged, this alleged scheme actually started in 2011. And it's interesting to note that I imagine that they were thinking that most people would not be paying attention since the country was so devastated, and we were just focused on trying to, bury our loved ones, as well as trying to get them, under the ground. So that's really significant, right, to really discuss, because you are thinking a devastating earthquake took place in 2010, and this president, although a lot of Haitians think that he was a place president because the people did not really elect him, decided that he was going to make an executive decision, while I guess no one was really paying attention, that he was going to collect $1.50, for every transaction that we send. And just so the audience is aware, the Haitian diaspora every single year, and in 2019, that's the last data that we have, we send home about, I would say, $3.3 billion. Okay, $3.3 billion. And for someone to basically make a decision, an executive decision, that they were going to take $1.50 of that $3.5 billion is alarming. But that's what I want people to understand, that this was happening around the most devastating earthquake, the most devastating thing Haitians were going through. And the thing that Martelly was thinking about the most was how to actually collect $1.50 of every transaction, every money that the Haitian diaspora sent home. I guess the thing that I'm curious about too, I want to ask both of you, is, so obviously it started in 2011. What was the pain point that your client was either complaining about, was feeling like this is not right, that they were desperate to reach out to the two of you, to the point where you actually took the case? Because obviously, and why did you decide to take the case? Did you feel like maybe you have a case? Because I have to be honest with the two of you, this is the first time that I'm aware of, because I know a number of Haitian attorneys, and most of them, they don't want to be bothered when it comes to lawsuits, because in their minds, they think, well, it just takes a long time. We don't really have the resources. We don't want to go against such and such. But one of the reasons why this was very interesting to me was because just the gut and the conviction and the courage that it took the two of you to say, you know what, I am going to actually take on this case, and I'm actually going to do something about what is happening, because you knew it was wrong. So I guess I would love to ask you, like, yes, your client came to you, but what were some of the pain points that your clients are going through? Did they go to Haiti to figure out whether or not the schools are not being built? What was happening between 2011 and 2018? If you can give us, the background.
Well,
Yeah, for clarity, Marcel, before you answer that, since Daniella mentioned it and we didn't explain it, on top of the $1.50 to send any food and money, there's also every 5 cents, from 23 cents on international calls, was also being taken by the government. So I just wanted to clarify that for the audience. Marcel, please go ahead.
That's correct. Well, one point of clarification: the 3.5 billion The $1.50 is an addition there too. It's not that they're taking it out of the 3.5 billion. Okay.
Wow.
It is
Okay.
an addition there too. That says, of course, we would never know the amount of money that the Haitian diaspora is actually sending back home, because some of us, we travel quite frequently back home, and we go home with a lot of with money as well, right? So those are not accounted for. So we would never know the size of money that the Haitians living outside of Haiti, because Africans in general are in the diaspora if they are not in Africa on the continent. But anyways, so that says the main reason I believe Daniela may be able to appreciate, our Haitians who are viewing this interview may appreciate it better than other brothers and sisters, or maybe not, because I believe that we probably are in the same boat. I mean, the main reason I believe Odilon felt that something needed to be done, it's because he is burdened with the task of actually paying schools for relatives, right? That's what we
I
do.
see. I
I mean,
see.
so we sending money back home. I believe that if my memory serves me correctly, 80% of the money we send back home would go towards education. Okay.
That's true.
And that's probably the main
Right.
reason why this character with his consort were able to come up with this scheme, because they believe, we've been sold this crazy idea that education is the key that opens doors. I don't know where we get that nonsense from. Okay, it does not. I mean, it places you in a position to take opportunity. I will say yes, but open doors, what door? It's clearly not for Africans, anyways. But anyways, that is something else. The main reason I believe that Odilon was frustrated, it's because every month he would receive countless phone calls from relatives back home telling him that, hey, listen, we cannot afford to pay the schools. They are going to send the kids back home. They're gonna miss out on the exams. And that is the main reason he came to me, really. He says, hey, listen, this is ridiculous. They're taking $1.50 every time I send money back home. And I thought that they were supposed to provide free education for the kids. And then when he came, he showed me pictures of where we wouldn't even let the worst animals, lived in, and that's that's what they're using. Those are the facilities that they're using to educate children. Okay, so they are exposed to the elements. It's not really a structure that is equipped, really, like I said, to even shelter, an animal, let alone human beings. So I think that got to him, and he's like, Marcel, I don't care. You figure this thing out, look into it. So as to whether we believe we had a case, of course we believe we had a case. When we looked into it, Rodney and I, we discussed it, and then we're like, hey, man, yes, we do have a case. We do have a solid case. And in fact, in addition to the Sherman Act, we are going to tag on all the other claims that we believe that we are entitled to. Okay, so yes, we believe we had a case. As to whether we have the resources to go after big guns, something that Dr. Martin Luther King said that came into my head, is that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think this particular case really speak gospel about his statement. Yes, it is an injustice that has followed us here in the United States. And now we are going to see whether the United States, with the appellation of being a nation of law, is going to live up to that reputation.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know, Daniella, you've mentioned, I mean, we talked about the broader Haitians outside of the country send so much money back, but Daniella's mentioned like an individual case where a family member has been sending money monthly for 50 years. I imagine who you're mentioning, just so the audience knows, Odilon is one of the plaintiffs, Odilon Celestine, along with,
Yes.
looks like 3 others rather. So when you're sending money for that long, and Daniella, feel free to jump in here, when you're sending money for that long and you're not seeing the kind of progress that kind of commitment should be able to produce in Haiti, then I think it just really adds to the frustration of it, right?
Exactly. And something else that I think that's interesting and worthy to mention is the fact that, in Haiti, there's a constant struggle for Haitian teachers to get paid. It is very common in Haiti for teachers to basically get paid every year. Sometimes they go for like 6, 7, 8 months and they don't get paid. And just just to give you a bit of background, in Haiti is mostly they mostly have private schools. The few government schools that exist are really not great. So just to really think about that, they're collecting all that money, and the teachers cannot get paid. That I know for a fact. And this has been an issue for the last 10 years. Actually, it's been on the news a lot, where teachers, like medical school students are actually going on strike because they have not gotten paid for like months. So it's interesting that your client, Rodney and Marcel, their main concern was the fact that the students, the children in Haiti, didn't even have a decent school to go to. But in addition to that, you also are dealing with the adults who actually went to school and they were not able to get paid because there's no money for the government to pay them, even though many of the schools are private. So I thought that was
yeah, really interesting. Rodney, so Marcel mentioned that he asked a few Haitian attorneys that, felt like, oh, we don't want to deal with this. It's too much. And I mean, I see the same thing within Ethiopian Americans or the diasporas. There's a difference between people that said, I don't want to be bothered. That's too big. And then some people will just say, this is wrong. We're going to try. So Rodney, looking at the case, what made you want to get involved?
First, as an attorney, I'm a litigator. And so when Marcel brought the issue to me and I asked him some questions about it and he explained it, I just thought that it was wrong. And because that it was wrong, I really didn't think about who the defendants were. I didn't care. It didn't matter to me. If we have a cause of action, let's pursue it. And that's how I go about my practice. So as a litigator, I am not so much concerned with, okay, we are going to have these individuals who are either billionaires because they're these corporations, and you have the government of Haiti and all of these things. That really never crossed my mind. It was just an issue that I thought that they were wrong. I thought that it was fraudulent. I thought it was a scam. And so I said, okay, let's go.
Yeah. And I mean, it does make it more infuriating that this all happened, as it often does in the backdrop of the earthquake, such a major disaster, right? So in terms of kind of moving this forward as far as where the case is, so the defendants are the former president, Michael Martelli, as well as the current president, I believe, right? And so okay, great. So in March, what the court said is, nope, you guys have to look at this case. There's some merits in this case. So what's next? And what are you guys asking for in the case? Is it just for this practice to stop, or is there actually a settlement, a repayment that you're looking for from the defendants?
Well, let me break it down. We are in federal court, the Eastern District of New York, and that court is located in Brooklyn. And what happened at the first phase was the defendants together as a collective filed a motion to dismiss, and the judge based it on two issues, something called forum non-convenience, and the other is the act of state doctrine. And so the judge agreed with them. And as I just indicated, I am a litigator. I disagreed with the judge. So I tell Marcel, okay, we'll appeal. And we appealed to the Second Circuit. And we had arguments, I think, in September of last year. And so what the Second Circuit did, the Second Circuit totally reversed the federal claims on act of state. And then with the forum non-convenience, the court told him that, well, you didn't use the proper standard. You didn't use the proper standard when you made this decision, because funny enough, a portion of the the judge's ruling was that the plaintiffs did not have a connection to the
To the
to
state.
where to the state, to where the court is. And one of the which was kind of harsh from the appellate court judge, was that Western Union is an American company. 4 of the defendants are Americans. 2 of them, I think, live in Brooklyn. So he didn't understand how she could make the argument that they don't have a connection to the forum. So they sent it back. So that was remanded. The act of state on the federal side was totally reversed. So now what the defendants have done is that they're now asking again to dismiss the case. And so they have other issues. For example, Western Union said the case should go to arbitration because each time you get a contract, when you send money through Western Union, there's an arbitration clause there. I think the government of Haiti is saying that we don't have jurisdiction over them. And so they've all come up with these, I call them these wonderful theories, which I really think don't make any sense based on the law, looking at it from a legal perspective. Because I've told Marcel, if I think that we don't have a viable cause of action, I am the first to say this is not viable. But I think all of so now they're asking the court again to dismiss the case based on all these other criteria. I think all of it is nonsense. So we'll just have to wait for them to file their briefs, and then we will respond, and then we will see what the decision is, and we'll go from there. So we're actually we're just waiting.
Okay, this is a waiting period. It's interesting. So just for the audience to kind of get the picture, in 2018, this was filed. In 2020, the judge, in what appears to be kind of a lazy, judgment, when you really look at it, said this is a sovereignty issue, or sovereignty issue rather, when it comes to Haiti, when really there was actual corruption within the government that was affecting people in the United States. And the second part of what you guys said is, in the judgment, it said the plaintiffs didn't have enough of a connection to the court that they were filing this case in, which was also just on the surface seems completely untrue. And so now it's gone back to that initial court for further evaluation. So Marcel, what and you guys are in a waiting period. So what are you looking for? What would be what would be considered success? I mean, the fact that you guys have gotten here is, I think, pretty historic from what I gather, right, Daniella? So that's really encouraging. So what is the outcome that you guys would be happy with?
Go ahead, Rodney.
I think for a court to say, or at the end of the day, that there was a Sherman Act violation by the parties and the government of Haiti. And so we would need to find out actually how much money was sent to Haiti where the $50 is concerned, and where did the money go? Because we need to find out who took the money, because we know that they cannot account for the monies that were sent, because within the first 6 months, I think, there was $28 million that were missing, and no one could give an account for the money. So the success, or what we're looking for, is the people who sent the money, they deserve to get their money back, because you didn't use the money for what you allege that was the purpose of you creating this scheme for. And so I think it would be very important, and even set a precedent where maybe others would not try this kind of scam, for the court to say, no, this is a Sherman Act violation. You cannot get together and say, oh, we are going to do this, and then try to use not even the laws of Haiti. You just create some foolishness to say, okay, this is our justification. So I think that success is, for, at the end of the day, for everyone, especially in Haiti, who either receive money or people in the diaspora, to say, okay, so somebody finally took them on and just exposed this scam for what it is, and a court in the US have said, yes, this was wrong.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Go
and,
ahead.
and and I would like to add, it is I hope that folks really understand this is not just about Haitian. I mean, if the courts were to allow this scheme to actually go on, every single we Africans, we are the one in the United States to send more money back home than any other group of people. Okay, so I mean, if they were to allow this nonsense to go on, there's no telling whether Ethiopia is not going to be next, whether Ghana is not going to be next, and whether Trinidad is not going to be next. So we are hoping that well, I mean, again, we are willing to go all the way back to the to the Court of Appeals, to the second circuit, and if need be, to the Supreme Court, provided that they will
Yeah,
anyway.
and I mean, it's a lot of money we're talking about. Before I let Daniella step in, I mean, if you get this judgment, is it going to be more of a symbolic judgment because of how much money is actually involved, or do you think the government of Haiti will actually be able to pay the judgment?
Well, the good thing is that we're not just looking at the Haitian government. I mean, the Haitian government is not the only party here, right? So we have other deep pockets as well. The corporations, they have collected billions of dollars, and our position is clear on that. That they are sharing in the $50. Okay, and that, I mean, they are charging the so-called Haitian government a fee out of the $50. So they have been profiting from it. So consequently, they are going to be paid, they are going to pay whether the Haitian government can or cannot, whatever deal the Haitian government is going to have to work out with them, that is on the Haitian government, but somebody going to make us whole.
But I don't want this point to be lost. I think as part of what is a win, because I think the win is layered. The moment that a court tell the corporations and the Haitian government that they cannot do this anymore, they cannot collect the $50, especially in the manner in which they are doing it, I think that actually would be a huge win, maybe a bigger part of the win, because then it would stop this practice that has been going on for almost a decade. So that is very, very important for us to be able to get the court to tell them, no, you cannot do this because it's in violation of the laws of the United States.
Wow. I want to bring something up because as I was reading the brief, there was one thing in particular that kind of surprised me in terms of the corporations that were included as part of the defendant. And that was Digicel Haiti. I thought that was interesting because in 2016, Digicel was at the crosshair of another scandal regarding the fund company. So it was very interesting to me, and I'm hoping that the two of you can talk about the kind of, I guess, discovery that you found specifically relating to Digicel, because according to several articles, and I have one, and I can send it to the show notes, Amela. In 2016, the head of Haiti's largest cell-phone company, Martin Boot, was actually sent an invitation letter by the public prosecutor of Port-au-Prince, Denton Léger, to appear before the court and clarify the role of the company Digicel in terms of disseminating preliminary results of the election that year. And that made a big deal. It was a big scandal in Haiti. So it was very interesting to me as I was reading the brief and I was getting ready for this interview, for me to see that Digicel came up again, and something relating to Haiti. And Digicel, just for the audience, you probably don't know, Digicel is like one of the largest private firms in Haiti. And this is not the first time they've been involved in some kind of scandal concerning Haiti. So what is it that you discovered during your investigation? Can you talk a little bit specifically about Digicel? Because I know like unit transfer, those are automatically, transfer company. We have to go through them in a way to send money home. But what exactly does Digicel have to do with this, and how are they involved in this?
Well, Digicel, we have to be grateful to Digicel because they gave us the smoking gun, right?
Really?
Digicel, O'Brien, Dennis O'Brien, the owner of Digicel, came on live, interviews with a recording interview with Mateli, where he himself, well, the both of them admitted that they put this entire scheme together long before Mateli became president. What was sworn in as president. Okay, so that's how they came in, and also claiming that there was a law enacted by the government of Haiti that now that is O'Brien, or should we say Digicel speaking through O'Brien, claiming that there was a law enacted to fund special education when Mr. Dennis O'Brien knew darn well there was no such a law. In fact, the so-called presidential decree or executive order, whatever we want to call it, made no mention whatsoever of education. So the 5 cents that they decided to tag on into the 17 cents that Haitians were already paying, or the 18 cents I think that the Haitians were already paying per minute, had nothing to do with education, but quote and unquote to fight telephone fraud. That's all that the so-called decree says. Yet Mr. Dennis O'Brien still would go out there and represent to the public that this particular piece of so-called executive order calls for the funding of education. So that's how Digicel got into it.
Interesting. It's so funny because they give themselves away because you do have these specific, news outlet. We call them the corporate media. They love to be able to promote these people, and yet they have no idea in promoting the things that they are doing. They're actually giving themselves away. That's a really good point. Which, to my point, the next question that I have is regarding the act of state doctrine, right? You guys were able to sort of like turn this case around by showing from what, and I had a conversation with you offline a little bit, Marcel, where you mentioned like Haiti is the fourth country where where it won the appeal. Can you talk about can you and Rodney talk about the other three countries? I think Cuba was one. And what were these cases about? Were the judge that actually gave the victory in March used as a leverage to actually give you guys a victory? What were the cases about? Can you give us a sense of what they were?
Well, the one was about when I mentioned Cuba, it's the Sabatino matter pertaining to some expropriation of sugar that Cuba had decreed, was one, and then we also had the Sharon versus New York Times is the second one.
Hmm.
We also, and the third one was Kachef versus Paribas, okay, which was a bank, a French bank, okay, that would finance the government of Sudan at the time, okay, and then
Interesting.
the Sudanese came, and then some of the victims came, and then they filed suit against Paribas for financing the Sudanese government in committing atrocities against the Sudanese people. Okay, and then now came us here with the $1.50. So this is I believe this is we are the fourth, correct? We are the fourth one, the fourth matter that came before the court on the act of state matter. When you're writing in the law, you have to have references, right?
Okay.
And then and you have to guide the court based on prior rulings. This is what we call stare decisis in the law, or precedents, right?
Right.
Just go flying off the handle and saying, hey, listen, we have a right, and we just simply believe that we have a right. So those are key matters that were decided prior to our cases, and those are these decisional laws coming out of a court that sets the precedent, and for us to understand whether we do have a claim or not. And that's what Rodney was talking about. Okay, and it's by reading those cases that give us the ruling, the decision coming out of those cases that tells us that, hey, listen, you do have a claim, and you can go to court and enforce that the right that you have that are being infringed upon. When you in the law, what you are looking at is just identical facts, fact pattern, right? That's what you are looking at. So you're looking at when we looked at Kashef, it was the same argument. Well, the act of state bars a court in the United States from actually looking at an official act committed outside of the United States. Okay, and that's what the so-called act of state is all predicated upon. Okay, and as you mentioned earlier, Amala, the judge didn't even do the bare minimum to say, hey, wait a minute here. Okay, let me take a good look at this thing here. Okay, granted that whatever the conspiracy to defraud folks here in the United States occurred outside of the United States, but the effect is here in the United States. Okay, and under our laws, if it has effects, if it affects people here, there is at least minimum contact. Okay, this is law school 101 that judge
Right.
should have done. Okay, because the judge worked also at Cravat, Swin, and more. So we are not talking about one regular law school student, graduate student who passed the bar, and it's because Cravat is not going to hire anybody. So we would like to believe, right? So this is where she came from. So this is law school 101. Is there a minimum contact? And if there's minimum contact, then we need to look at this thing a little closely. Here I have 3 transfer companies, okay, that are incorporated here in the United States. So at least lawfully, they have some kind of personality, legal personality that we can call to be American corporations, right? Or at least corporations that are registered in the United States to do business in the United States. And then let us look at who are the victims, or folks that are here in the United States. So the bare minimum exists. Still, she made the ruling that she made. So that says we're not really so much talking about other countries that had dealings with Haiti that came into the matter. We're just looking at precedents, how the cases were brought by citizens or even the government. There are instances, for example, the Chinese case that we mentioned involved an assassination here in the United States by the Chinese government. So the
Huh.
widow of the deceased sued the Chinese government for wrongful death. Okay, and then
Interesting.
that's where the act of state issue came on. Okay, and we were going all over the place looking for for cases to support our position, and this is one of the closest one that we found to that closely resembles our fact pattern, that they conspired to kill the Chinese guy here in the United States, and then they carried out the assassination here in the United States. So it was somewhat identical to our case, where they conspired to defraud us outside of the United States, but defrauded us here in the United States. You see, and so it was just you're just using precedents to make comparison and hopefully convince the court that yes, there is merit to your claims.
Interesting. Let me ask you something, Marcel. During this process, obviously, you probably talked to Rodney about this too, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Was there anything that surprised you while going through this case?
Listen, we Africans, we have been under siege for well over 2,000 years. We've lost control over our own destiny, since we've come in contact with foreigners. Thanks to the ancestors, Ethiopia was never colonized. So if you are a student of history, you would understand that nothing that is being done to us as a people should come to you as a surprise.
You know what's interesting about that, though, Marcel? Although that's officially true, and Daniella and I about technically true, I should say. Daniella and I talk about this a lot, like currently.
Yes.
there's so many different systems that are still
Mhm.
colonizing us, though, right? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
while I don't know of a specific case that mirrors this one that you guys have taken on, and it's not, but I'm encouraged by the idea that diaspora who cares about their native lands actually has the power to protect the people on that land, the less fortunate people in many cases,
Mhm.
using our experience, our education, and just our sheer will too. I think that has to be part of it. And I think seeing a case that is doing well, that is advancing, is actually very encouraging to those that for so long have felt powerless, have seen this, the government in the country where they live in, as well as the government that's abroad, that's
Mhm.
often working with some of the neo-colonists, abusing
Mhm.
the people. So I'm so encouraged by that. So we're going on close to an hour, so I want to give you guys just kind of anything else that we didn't talk about that's worth mentioning, and I do hope to be able to follow up on this case.
Well, I'll add something else. One of the reasons why I really wanted to have this this conversation and this interview with you, Amela and Marcel and Rodney, is because I think oftentimes, specifically in the Haitian community, there is a sense of helplessness, right? There's a sense of, we don't know what to do. This is as good as it gets. This is what's gonna happen, and there's nothing we can do. And I wanted to do this show because what it means, what it shows is that Haitians in the diaspora can use the legal means in the United States to hold the Haitian government accountable. And whether or not it's going to take a long time, I think this is a major beginning where the two of you, through your clients, are sending a message basically that, the party is almost over. The idea of just, being so easily, well, you take Haiti, where Haiti is sort of like an experiment, an exploitation place where you can do whatever you want to do with it. I think this case has already shown that no, not necessarily. So what I'm hoping that this conversation will do, because the two of you are not the only Haitian attorneys and Jamaican attorneys. And I don't know if the audience knows, but Rodney is actually not Haitian, only Marcel is. Rodney is actually from Jamaica. And that was also very important to me. I don't know if you guys mentioned this earlier, Amela, but that was powerful to me too, because again, the narrative is when, we're always fighting, right? We almost like it, Jamaicans are always fighting Haitians, Haitians are always fighting Dominicans, but that is not true. There are people who are actually coming together for the greater good. Like, Amela is from, she was born in Ethiopia, I was born in Haiti. Yes, it's the same root, we're from the same root, but at the end of the day, we grew up in different places, but we are able to come together to do something. And that's what I'm hoping this conversation will be about, that Haitians do not have to just sort of like stay on the sideline. Use the skills, use what you have. The two of you have a legal mind, so you are able to use your legal background to say, no, this is not okay. This is not okay. I am going to take this case for this client because this is distressing this Haitian, this group of Haitians. So I'm going to do something about it. So to me, that was very significant. Is there anything else? Because I know in the beginning, when I actually learned about this case too, Komokoda, I need to reference that too, and I'm very grateful for them because they, as far as I know, they were the only independent media to the radio that was actually, letting people know. And since I listen and I'm a supporter of Komokoda, I wanted to follow up. Have there been other Haitian organizations that have reached out to you, that, not the corporate media that just want a couple of quotes, but that have reached out to you guys and sort of like want to I guess, support? Or I know you don't need it because you've been doing this, from what I understand, on your own. You and Rodney, it's your own resources. Just so everybody knows, they spend their own money, their own resources, their own time. There's no one really supporting them. Since this victory in March, have you guys had any organizations reach out to you, like anything of that sort that you can talk about?
No, I mean, I thank you for mentioning Komokoda. They have been very instrumental in assisting us. In fact, I got most of the evidence that we have been able to collect came from Komokoda, indeed. Andre
Interesting.
Dowd, yes, from Andre Dowd. Thank you for reminding me of it and for mentioning Komokoda's name. But no, nobody else has reached out to us, and we did not anticipate anybody reaching out to us. The I believe that I would be remiss if I did not pay tribute to my professors who are no longer here with us, who have joined our ancestors. Dr. John Henry Clark, Leonard Jeffries, Brother Small is still alive from City College of New York.
Wow.
Edward Scobie, Sister Bain, and I can name Dr. John Henry Clark. I can name a number. Ben Jokanen, Ivan Vincertima. I've had the privilege of being schooled and educated in the African way by those scholars. And I think it's very important for us Africans to actually, it's, we are being educated to serve. We are not being educated to create for ourselves. And that is the reason why we have not been able to get ourselves out of the mess that we find ourselves in. And so I believe that the credit I would attribute, the person that I am, and the reason why I am able to take on this case, it's because of the way that I was groomed by those scholars. They are the one who took me back to Haiti, and there's no way I could have been able to be involved with this suit if I never returned home and acquired the not necessary knowledge, not only of the French language, but also of the little nuances that exist in our society back in Haiti, in our culture back in Haiti, and bring it back here, and for me to be able to see clearly the injustice that has befallen us as a people. So,
I love
um,
that. I love
you
that.
know,
Yeah, no, all of that. I mean, I'm feeling all of that. Just so the audience know, Komokoda is a Haitian-led organization group based in New York.
Yes.
And so they were instrumental in sort of working through this case. And I think you both are right in terms of we need people that have the courage, that have the knowledge and the conviction to set precedent like this so that we can kind of combat the helplessness. I see it in different diaspora groups. We're trying to kind of get people to feel more empowered, because it seems like for so long people felt like they didn't have much of a choice. But I think these kind of steps are so important. Thank you guys for so much for making the time. Thank you for being courageous. Thank you for seeing how our struggles are connected. I think that is such a huge part of making progress. I mean, it would be way less interesting if we're just only talking about our native countries. And I guarantee you, I would be willing to bet there's another country either on the African continent or somewhere in the global south where something like this, if not exactly this, is happening, and we're just not aware of it yet, or they're just not aware of it yet. So hopefully this has a positive domino effect. Marcel, Daniella, thank you so much. Rodney had to leave us a little early, but I appreciate his time too. Look forward to talking to you again.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. And just one last thing I think that's really important is that Marcel generally does not do English interviews. This is this is the first English interview that he has done live. I mean, other papers have actually quoted him, but I'm super, super grateful for taking the time, for giving us the time, and for your patience, and really doing this interview. So I really appreciate that. And in a way, I also want to mention this too, just to be transparent, since I came in a little bit later during the interview, is that Marcel and I actually childhood friends. We grew up in the same town in Haiti. We're mentioning that off the air, but I want to make sure that's also mentioned. So it's really great to see him really staying consistent and really keeping his convictions in terms of really taking care of and seeing the big picture and taking care of the masses. So thank you so much for the privilege of this time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. See you guys soon. Hey everybody, please support independent journalism based on the truth by going to patreon.com/HermelaTV and becoming a member. Thank you so much for your support.